Hello, everybody, and welcome to the experience. And today we have a very, very special guest. And we are inviting, and I'm going to do it very unsmoothly, I guess, Cynthia Sue Larson. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you.
You're
Such a
welcome.
pleasure to be here.
Thank you. I'm so glad you're here. I really appreciate it. And so Cynthia Sue Larson, for all of those of you who are just tuning into the show, and maybe you've heard of her, maybe you haven't, but those who haven't, she's a best-selling author of 6 books, and I got into reading Quantum Jumps, and I first heard about you on Gaia, connecting with your interview with Regina Meredith, which was totally awesome. And she helps people to visualize whole new worlds of possibilities. She's been featured on the Discovery Channel. She's been on the History Channel, Coast to Coast AM, and the BBC, and has presented papers on science, spirituality, and consciousness. And so she blends, and you're going to be able to say this in a more dynamic way than me, but I love what she's doing because she blends quantum science and science. She has a physics background, and with metaphysical concepts, with consciousness, with spirituality. And so welcome to the show, Cynthia. I really appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you, Nora. Such a pleasure to be here.
Yay.
Glad to be on the show.
Yay.
Glad to see you, too.
Yeah. It's nice to have this technology, even though we're both kind of struggling with it before we got on. It's like, you know, moving at the speed of sound, and we're like just catching up. Okay. So, you know, the stuff that I understand, as I understand the work that you do, you're a life coach, and you bring these concepts into the collective by writing books and giving talks. And since you're a life coach, I'm assuming that you are definitely meeting with people on a one-on-one basis. But just tell me a little bit about what got you into this work. Why bringing consciousness and reality shifting into the realm of science? Or the other way around.
Wow. I'll try to do the short version of the answer, but it's a big story, and it kind of goes back through most of my life, actually, because I've had a lifelong fascination with consciousness and existence, and I was a strange child, I guess. but I remembered what it was like before I was born, so that set up a lot of that was a transformative thing, and it's been with me. And when I went through a Kundalini awakening in 1994, I got reformatted back to that consciousness's primary point of view.
Okay, so I have to pause you. And I mean, it's okay if it's a long story, because this is the experience after all, and your experience. This is what's going to help my audience understand how amazing people are doing their work, their really unique, special work in the world. And so, first of all, as a hypnotherapist too, you remember life before being born. You have to talk more about that.
Okay. Well, it was kind of it was a blissful experience. It sort of felt like I was on the wrong planet in a way, because this was a difficult place, and I just remembered things being a lot easier. That when you think of someone, they're right there. That everybody actually loves you, and then so this place seemed really kind of wrong. And so I couldn't shake the memory of what it was like before I was born. So I've never, that's just always with me. Mm-hmm. And so I see that the whole world through that lens. And believe me, that changes things. And to a degree that it's hard for me to even appreciate, because I don't see it any other way. I don't see that this view of we just live here and then we die and then we're gone. That to me is not true. Never has been true. Doesn't feel right. And so you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So for me, yeah. And so it's been kind of an unusual journey in that sense. Even though, as I said, when I had a Kundalini awakening, it was a time to get back into the reality of what I knew to be true. Because up until that time, I had been enculturated. I had been drinking the Kool-Aid. I'd been doing things you're supposed to do if you're studying physics at UC Berkeley. If you work in a corporation, I worked at Citibank. I was a project manager there, in charge of big projects on the vice president track and so forth, all that.
That always blows my mind.
Yeah, so with all that stuff going on, I think I needed a Kundalini awakening to really get shaken back on track. So,
well, I want to talk to you more about your Kundalini awakening, but I wanted to sort of drill down a little bit more about the whole banker, paradigm, because I had Pete Smith, who is the president of the Newton Institute, on the show, and he also had been a banker. And I think that's really interesting how, like, people who are massive light bringers and healers, having that very 3D existence, and I just marvel at that. It may seem like a small thing, but I appeal to audience members who may be more like me, who like really suck at those kinds of things, like the detail, the numbers. I was an admin assistant for a while, and I was really a lousy one at that. And the more I awakened, the crappier I got at those kinds of things. And so I think it's really interesting to have that juxtaposed with your very clear memory of the spirit realm, of you pre-human Cynthia.
Yeah. Well, before my Kundalini awakening in 94, and so that was, I was how old was I? So I was 32 when that happened. But so that whole span of the first 32 years, I was taking advantage of remembering. There's a gift that a person gets when you are born aware and you know that you already existed before this lifetime. And the gift is intuition, basically. It's huge. So you better believe I was good at choosing which projects we're going to go through. So I could look to like I did the work of like 20 people because I knew where to focus all my attention. There was no wasted time. So yeah, sure, I worked a 10-hour day, but I would get way more accomplished than seemed humanly possible because there was no wasted effort.
Well, what was that a way? And I think this is a really important point because people are really struggling in their jobs that they don't feel like, people who are feeling connected, like I have to make a living, I have to pay the bills, I have to do all of these things. And so they're in those kinds of jobs. And I think it's really significant for you to mention how your intuition led you through projects. And those projects were the ones that would bear fruit. And I'm wondering, do you think those were more delightful projects to be a part of, that were maybe more pleasurable to participate in than others?
Yeah, often that was the case. And I could feel that there was energy there. So, and I was doing a lot of matrix management at Citibank because I'd be dealing with people across the continent. So I was in California coordinating a project with people in New Jersey and New York and telling them what to do. And I was younger than them and they had no reason to do what I said. So everything depended on the energy, on the feeling, on the love. And I think that is key. So, and that's an environment that a lot of people don't excel in, as my managers often would lament, because they would interview people and find out, wow, they really don't get this matrix management, that, you have to get people to do things that have no reason to do it for you. It doesn't, you do not run their life. You don't grade them. You're not giving them some sort of a performance review. You don't affect their salary. So why would they want to do this for you?
So what is matrix management? I don't even know what that is.
It's an idea that a manager can inspire someone to do something when, like I just said, there's no reason that they would want to or should have to. And so it means that you're managing the project and getting people to produce deliverables by certain deadlines to actually accomplish tasks when they have a very busy schedule and they also have way too much to do. And you're getting them to do those parts of it on track, on time, for that project. So
that is so cool. And because the reason I think that's cool is because there's probably a huge group of people who have not awakened, who are still working in this framework of the corporate position, who don't have the multidimensional skills you're talking about. And so that's cool. So like how did you think about it? How did you, to me, it sounds like just the word matrix, is multidimensional in nature to people like us. And so were you seeing streamers of consciousness? Were you seeing through lines or energy, or like what was going on in addition?
Okay, so I could feel things. I could feel a connection, like a heart-to-heart connection with someone. And so that was why they would want to do something, and why they would set down everything else they're doing and say, okay, for you, I'll get this done, by next Monday or whatever. And I said, thank you. That's awesome. Because like I said, I'm not giving them a paycheck. I'm not writing their performance review.
So you're connecting to their heart.
Yes.
That's just so simple. And I think, that's probably something that everyone can relate to, whether they are, on this end of the continuum that is very hard science, traditional science, or on the far on the metaphysical end of the spectrum. The heart is just an undeniable tool, or, I don't even know how to say it, but yeah.
And we all know it too. I work with kids because I also teach martial arts. And so I work with preschoolers. I love them because when they're like 2, 3, 4 years old.
Oh my gosh.
I know. They're like magic. You're so in that. It's not really martial arts that I'm teaching.
I know. I'm like, that's got to be interesting.
I mean, well, you have kids, you know what it's like.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
But what I love is that they're so in that moment that when you talk to someone right there, they are right there. Mm-hmm. And they feel when your heart is with them, they know the difference.
Oh, yeah.
And so if they're coming and they're crying, if they feel that your heart is right there, they stop crying instantly. Like, what happened? I hit my head, but but they feel fine. It's kind of like magic. So love is magic.
They can imagine. They don't have any doubt whatsoever. They can imagine, like, okay, you see this really fun giant teddy bear, and they're just like, okay, yeah. I see that teddy bear. That's why they have the potential to be like, to turn this whole reality into magic if they just keep
They do.
It. Yeah.
And it needs to go in the how good can it get direction, which I think that's the challenge, because humans have a trickster nature. And I see that even with the preschoolers. Like just the other day, I don't know why, one 4-year-old said to another, "Those are not your socks." I mean, clearly these were his socks, but that got into his head. It's like, these are not my socks.
They're not. Well, then whose socks are they? What?
But the reason I mention that is because we laugh at it, but this is exactly, it's in Star Wars. These are not the droids that you're looking for. So there's a construct here where what we believe does become reality in a big way. And most of us are, when we're just kind of shuffling along and being part of that herd, we've got the blinders on, then it's easy for us to get fooled and think those are not my socks. And we can laugh about it. like, well, whose socks are they? And why are they on my feet?
How did they get here?
And they're very distinctive. They're white and black stripes. So it's not just some random white sock.
These are not my socks. Yeah. I love it. I love that. So there's so much for us to talk about, and obviously it's just so much fun to talk to you. Oh, okay. Oh, as I flip around my little cord, what I realized recently, and I'm so glad that you mentioned your Kundalini awakening. I think there's a lot of people who don't know what the hell a Kundalini awakening is. I mean, you are in the Bay Area, but people are having them and may not even know what the heck's going on. So can you talk about your experience with that?
Okay, yeah, it happened over a period for me of a couple of weeks that were extremely intense, and I've barely slept at all. And every day I was trying to function in real life and having serious difficulty doing so. And I had to give a talk in front of hundreds of people during this 2-week period. And
wow.
the kind of stuff that was going on, it's going to sound, it does sound surreal. For example, sticks and stones were hitting the windows of my house. I was having like poltergeist activity all around.
Wow.
My daughter said, there's something in my face, and her skin was rippling under her skin. Like you see movement under the fascia of her face.
Whoa. So you were impacting the environment around you.
Yes, in a big way, in a huge way. So it's not just stuff I was imagining. It was affecting other people. My husband heard sticks and stones hitting our windows with nobody throwing them and no wind outside. So these are the kind of things. I'm mentioning it because there were witnesses. It wasn't just me. Because the other stuff I saw is going to sound like, well, you just lost your mind temporarily. You know, you're seeing angels, seeing, phenomena. You're suddenly getting 360-degree vision around even with your eyes closed. You know everything that's happening. You're spontaneously astral traveling. You know things that there's no way you could know.
Well, but people are going through it. I have clients who are going through it, and they're like, WTF.
Yeah, because very few things prepare you for it. It's not something that's commonly spoken of. There used to be some rescue websites for the Kundalini Effect. So, when that starts happening, then people could go there and get information. But now I don't know where to point people exactly. So, and it's very unique. It's kind of like when you're on the autistic spectrum, you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. Same thing with Kundalini. It's like every experience is very unique. Yeah, they're not all the same. So I felt like I was electrified with energy, and I could walk into rooms, and if I'm grounded and feeling good, everything was fine. And I had to learn to stay that way, and I still have to stay that way, because if I don't stay that way, then lights blow out, appliances fail, and it's spectacular.
Yeah, and that's tricky when you're trying to interview somebody. It's like, you don't want to blow out the hardware.
That's very true. Yes.
Well, I think I have heard of people having a spontaneous Kundalini through like lightning strike,
Yes.
But
what's good about it? Usually people get the help they need in those moments. And I know this for a fact because I've had 3 phone calls just randomly. These are times I don't usually pick the phone up, but I don't usually sit by the phone, and I don't have a cell phone. So I have to explain all that. So it just happens to be that I'm sitting by the phone, kind of in a very good meditative space. The phone rings and I feel like pick it up. So I pick, which I don't do because usually I screen all the calls. I pick it up, I talk, and then the person, they don't say hello. They just start talking to me because they're in the Kundalini experience. And they're probably about to spontaneously combust or something. And so, but through the phone, I just talk them through it, get the chakras lined up properly. This has happened 3 times. And then everything's fine. And then I hang up, and then I realize, well, there's another one. So the reason I'm mentioning it is because they did not know me. They got the phone number just like out of the blue. Kind of like things are going wrong, and you just think to yourself, I need help. You'll get help.
Yeah.
It might not be me with my phone number coming to you, but it'll be help. So people don't need to worry.
It's so true. And I think the more I'm a big fan of Abraham Hicks, and, the idea that you have to believe, the more you believe and allow, the more you can have these experiences on a more profound level. I think Abraham says, the more you allow, the more brilliant we can be, or we're as brilliant as you allow us to be. That's what they say. And I think that is absolutely true. But I think this trickster mind or this human condition, people doubt. And I deal with doubt in hypnosis when they're having incredible experiences. And so you're the type of person, Cynthia, where you knew this coming in. So belief, it sounds to me that it comes kind of easily for you. Like you can see some pretty weird stuff and be like, whoa, okay, well, here we are.
Yeah.
So what do you say to people? Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. If you want to say something, go ahead.
I do realize I'm different that way. So it's true. I mean, that's a pretty big difference to have that level of faith already. And then I needed like a booster rocket, and that was my grandmother because she had so much spiritual faith. You know, she believed in God, she believed in Jesus and angels, and that's all I'd ever talked to her about. So
Oh, cool.
that because I felt like here's someone finally that gets it, you know, that knows like I do that this is everything, that this is the real reality, and everything we think is real is some sort of a more dense, you know, pattern of things. It's heavy, and you know, it feels like wrong planet. No, I seriously felt like that, and I was going to leave at age 5. I was like, okay, my parents are right. You know, you can die if you run in front of a fast-moving car. If you do it just right, then you're not going to get maimed. You know, it takes precision, but I can do this. And so it took me till I was
at 5.
Yeah.
Wow.
But then there was this huge angelic intervention, and then they convinced me that I chose this, and I would be back, and I would have I'll just have another 5 years to get to the point I'm at now, at that time when I was 5. So that was very convincing.
Make it work.
Now I understand a lot better than I did at age 5 that my life is not my own and people depend on me. And I didn't get that when I was age 5. I thought they'll be fine. You know, kind of like they'll remember who they are. They know this, but they don't. And you're right. People don't know this. They don't know that we are light. And this is the power of that beautiful way that you worded it, that when you have that open mind, that you're able to experience, you know, how brilliant you can be.
Yeah. And thank you. And, you know, I bet you are talking to people and coaching them through this in your coaching. Am I correct?
Yes. Well,
So
I get a huge range of people. Yeah. Some people know, but they forget. And some people, you know, everybody's unique. Everyone's an individual. So I like to work with individuals. I think you do too, for that reason, because it's not that they're all the same, because they're not. So each person has their own way of seeing things and their own gifts to share. That's what makes it fun for me too.
I love when when people start to recognize their divine spark, that they are amazing. It's when that light starts to go on. Oh my gosh. Oh.
Yes.
Okay. Well, cool stuff. So moving on into your wonderful work, a lot of what I'm seeing on the stuff that you do, you talk a lot about the Mandela Effect, and the Mandela Effect is, I don't know if I think I might just totally not explain this properly, but it's how we have an experience and our memory is of one experience, and then over time things change, consciousness changes, the whole timeline changes, and reality shows up differently. So a memory of one event, and it's called the Mandela Effect, correct? Because people have memories of Nelson Mandela dying in prison, but then he later died again in the most recent memory that people have is it was after he had become president and died as an old man. But it happens with other things. I have a few experiences that recently happened that I want to talk to you about, but did I get that right?
Yeah, that's the idea. And also sometimes people remember product names that have changed, movie dialogue that is different, and things like that. So it could be anything at all, as well as people being alive again that you're certain passed away before, not just Nelson Mandela. So it's called the Mandela Effect, but that doesn't mean he's the only one that's happened to.
I had that with what's his name that just died, Reverend Billy Graham.
Right. Lots of people remember that he died many, many years ago.
Yes.
In fact, I think, he's died at least twice for a whole bunch of people.
Okay. Yay. Because I didn't have verification. I looked and it's like the internet has like thousands of things that were of obits and everything that were released all on the same day. I mean, thousands. Yeah. And I'm like,
right.
Weird.
And so it feels weird when you remember clearly, like, but he died before, and you can't find any trace of it except for these Mandela Effect or reality shift. That's the term I've been using since the 90s. So reality shift is a more general term, and it covers the personal experiences that you have when you put your keys down, you walk away, you come back, and they're not where you put them. And you know where you put them, but they're not there. So that's things appear, disappear, transform, and transport. And, dead people can be alive again. Sure. These are all reality shifts. And I've been writing about that, like I said, since the 90s with the Reality Shifters website, sharing firsthand reports. So, but the thing that's so cool about the Mandela Effect is finally we're getting to kind of like a wake-up point globally that enough people, thanks to the internet and thanks to the ability to not mind feeling like an idiot when you share, like, wait a minute, didn't he die before? Because it takes nerve and courage to stand up and say that. Yeah. And then you find out you're not alone. Lots of people are noticing it too.
Oh, so. Yeah. I had that with Kirk Douglas.
Yeah.
That's happened with you. You've heard of that happening with Kirk Douglas too? Absolutely.
Yeah, he died quite a few years ago, and now, last time I checked, he's still alive.
I know.
I know. It's like, how is this possible?
And who else? I feel like I've had that with other things too. I can't remember. And there's like, I know there's on your website, or is it your website? Now I'm having, my reality is totally blown. So, but there's
Well, I've been tracking this too for a long time. So
yeah. So
like in my book, Reality Shifts,
yeah, go ahead.
I talk about Larry Hagman. He was in the TV show Dallas. And so he was the first celebrity that I really noticed. He definitely died twice. And so that's when I started talking about this subject in my books. And that book, Reality Shifts, came out in 1998 originally. 1999, I was talking about it on my website and getting lots of other people corroborating, not just with Larry Hagman, but also Jane Goodall. And
I didn't do that one. I didn't have that experience.
There's her. Me personally, I saw Benicio del Toro, the actor, pass away.
Really?
But he died early in his career.
Oh, no.
Long time ago now. I'm so glad he's still alive. Yeah, what was weird is when he died, I just felt like, no. And I thought, but why do I care so much? I've only seen him in, like, I think he was in Traffic or something. And he kind of plays these sleazy bad guys.
The Usual Suspects. He was Fenster in The Usual Suspects. That role changed his life.
Yeah. He's so, he's a scene stealer for sure. So I'm so glad he's alive. And so lots of times it's a good feeling. Like, thank goodness they're alive. And it's not one of those where they're in their 90s and then they die, and then they die again at age 95, and now they're still alive at age 101 or something. That's amazing. But when they die young and then they're alive again, it feels wonderful. So
yeah, yeah, good job. You brought him back, Cynthia.
I don't know.
Well, and I'm wondering, sort of in my conceptual mind about timelines, are they having is every quantum possibility playing out, and you jumped into the timeline where he's alive still and didn't have that experience of death at that particular age?
Well, now we're getting into some cool areas, because I've seen flip-flopping reality shifts where, for example, I'll look out my window and I'll see my neighbor's roof, and sometimes they have leaf protectors in the gutters, and then the next day I'll look out and it doesn't. And there was about a 1 week period. It was just kind of fun. Like, let's see what we see today. And obviously I'm going back and forth between at least a couple of realities. And then it settled down, and now they don't have leaf protectors, as I'm checking right now. Like, nope, they don't. But you never know. It could come back. And why that? I don't know. But I'm bringing it up because that, to me, it's observing this the way a biologist would witness a bird or an animal. And to me, that's how I'm studying reality shifts. They seem very natural. This is not a phenomenon that fits easily into a laboratory setting. It's not something where you can have a hypothesis and feel like you've constrained everything properly, and only what's going to happen is happening in here, because the things that happen are on a global, universal scale. That means that we're basically getting quantum phenomena occurring at every single level of reality. So I want people to understand that, because this is really the basis of it. And then when you start seeing that, then we can get into your question, which is the heart of, how, it's kind of like, how many realities are there, and are they all real?
Yeah.
And are there many me's, and do they all feel like they're real?
Yeah.
What's going on here?
Yeah. Yeah. And I see it in my work too, where we go into past timelines, fix stuff. And I think a lot of energy healers do this, and people who, various different healers will do this, and then reality will change. I have a client where we did a past life regression where she was murdered by a person that she was currently in a business relationship with, who was antagonistic. And we went into the spirit world and found that they had an agreement, a soul contract, to have him kind of antagonize her and literally murder her in a number of lives. And we healed that and changed the agreement. And 2 weeks or so later, she called me back and she said, and this guy was the CEO. He was fired.
Oh. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, this stuff is real. I don't know how.
Yeah, it's totally real. And sometimes people will see massive changes around them as well, not just with one other person, but in lots of areas. So one small thing, it is like the butterfly effect. Mm-hmm. You can see huge changes.
Well, and it's a tangent, but when you were talking about your daughter, when you were going through your Kundalini, and then your daughter was experiencing, it was almost like, it's like what you would see on TV of a representation of what that would be, sort of like when people take, I don't know, Harry Potter, they take the polyjuice potion and change into another face or whatever. It's like she was merging energetically or expressing this shift in a physical form.
Well, yes. And that was the same night the rocks were hitting the windows. I was about to give my talk. I felt my spirit wasn't in my body. And that's when I realized, when it starts affecting my daughter, well, as a mother, that gets your full attention. Yeah. The rest of it, it's like, okay, rocks are hitting windows. Oh, well. But then when this starts happening to my daughter, it's like, that's not okay.
Yeah, that's huge.
So then I had to find a way to, it was just a weird thing where I had to give a talk feeling like I wasn't fully in my body. I was all over the place. But I had to find a way to really be stable and feeling love and feeling calm. Even that expanded. I mean,
what
it was crazy.
Challenge. That's a huge challenge. But I feel into that, Cynthia, and I think that that's going to be happening a lot more, and it is happening a lot more to people. And so, and I even think that the concept of grounding is changing. I've worked with a practitioner where it's like, don't ground directly into the planet, ground into your personal Merkaba. It's like, there's so much information out there now about what works. But would you agree that when overwhelm sits in the process of awakening or just becoming more that quickening energy feeling that people get when they're going through stuff like this, do you agree or disagree that you get to decide how fast it goes, that you can actually slow it down and say, whoa, chill, or no?
Well, to some degree. I think this gets to we assume we know who I am, and mm-hmm. we assume we know when we use that word, we assume so much. And I think
so true.
What I'm noticing is often we've already made it some kind of agreement as to how fast this energy is going to be moving for us. And so what I would recommend is for a person to get more familiar with the fullness of themselves and how expanded are they, what kind of agreements have they made, what is their ideal of how good things can get. That's why it's my favorite question, mm-hmm. because it's a focusing question, and how good can it get ties in directly with your sense of self, because it's implied. It's how are you fitting in with everything. And when you look at the answer to that question, are you focusing on what you think you are or what you think all is, and mm-hmm. who are you? It's right in the question, but mm-hmm. it's kind of like the key to it. So,
well, it can be. I mean, it's sort of focus specific, right? So whatever you're focusing on, that's what you're considering how good it could get. So you can say, okay, so how good can it get? And so you go to one concept and you look at that, but then it becomes this, it can expand as much as you want it to expand, or drill down as microscopically, like maybe like health, or your energy, or your spirituality, or I guess those aren't small, but you can expand it and contract it and utilize that same question to view every aspect of your life, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think for me, the key to it is that I trust that my high self, my spirit, and my subconscious all the way through knows what good is. And so I'm trusting all of me to wish actually what's best for all concerned. Because I don't really believe in a claw one's way to the top and trample people on the way up. I don't believe in, I win, you lose. I believe in win-win. And I believe the only way that I can win is we all win. So it's a very... I know that's different.
No, I think that is, well, I mean, I think people are moving into that more and more. I think that's it's an inevitable progression. And I don't want to say better, but it's sort of like, if you have certain understandings about life and unconditional love and all of those good things, then certain points of view start to unfold, and you get there to that non-competitive place.
I know it's not a common thing, because my favorite card game is a win-win game. It's Klondike. It's double solitaire. You play with it's 7 cards down, 1 face card showing on the 7 piles, but you're facing a partner. The goal is there's only one way to win. You have to cooperate. So then you play in the 8 aces, and you can play on your partner's aces. But if either one of you is trying to selfishly, win on your side, then there's a guaranteed loss for both. And This is like my favorite game, because it brings people into that state. And I know people don't like it because my friends are not interested. My daughters are like, oh, brother, not this. No, I know people like competitive games. So
I got to learn that game, Cynthia, because I'm that way. I am so that way too.
Then I'd play with you.
Yeah, that would be really, really fun.
My daughters think this is boring. It's like we always win. And I said, no, this is such a good feeling, just to feel like we are winning.
Go, you go now. Well, yes. And I'm a twin. I was born with a twin. And so that is something that is innate to me. And I think why this work, when you have a non-competitive point of view, this work can really propel you I think it's a great spiritual place to be, and support people in their journey to start to people are competitive with themselves. They're really competitive with themselves. And that can turn into we don't need to go down that road, but, so I want to talk more about stuff to shift gears. So quantum jumping was that your latest book? That was your most recent book?
Yeah, it is. It's I've got a copy here so I can show it. Like, yay, quantum jumps.
Yay!
This is the new one. Yes.
I love that book. It's a really awesome book, you guys.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
It is. And I utilized you went through a whole chapter on finding stuff that you lose. And I actually utilized that point of view to save a client from even having to come in to see me. She wanted me to regress her to where she lost her ring so she could find it. And I had just finished your chapter. I'm like, I'll save you some money. Just hang out with me for a second while I explain this process. But the thing is, you have to believe 100% or it's just not going to work. And so I said, I'll give you 2 days. And if you call me back and you don't find it, I'll regress you. We'll do the whole thing. But if not, you'll save some money. 2 days go by, I don't hear anything. And then I call her back. I'm like, hello, did you happen to find your ring? Oh my gosh, I forgot to call you. Yes, it was in my dresser on top of my stuff. I opened the drawer and it was just sitting right there on top of my clothes.
Yeah. Perfect. That sounds like she did perfectly with the technique.
Well, and it's so funny too, because I see this a lot in my work too, is that like consciousness is a funny thing. When you believe something absolutely, it becomes so dovetailed and so seamless that people go into it almost like, what? Not a big deal. Like it doesn't seem like this huge thing, which is,
Right.
I've learned is a really big, really great sign and an accomplishment. But there's sometimes it's like, no, that was big, but you just think it was so easy. And it's like that was a quantum leap just to do that.
Right. Yeah. Our beliefs often go unobserved and like, these are not my socks. And you have a moment like that. It's so funny.
This is going to get a lot of benefit. Really, this is a good one. But so, yeah, let's talk about finding stuff in the sort of the quantum point of view, your point of view.
Well, in my point of view, even writing the book Quantum Jumps was fun, because I started writing the book, I think it was January 1st that year, and I just, it's kind of like the book was working with me. It's like being pregnant when you write a book. For me, it's like having the spirit of the new being with you through the whole process. But one of the things I liked best was finding the research that I needed as I was writing the book, because I'd get to a chapter and something I know from being born aware and all that, and just knowing that this is the way it should work. So therefore, at this point in time, we should have the science to support this. So I'd go looking for the research to back me up. And it was amazing and wonderful that every time I did that, there would have just been a research study published that week that indicated, yes, yes, we're looking for multiple signs of background cosmic radiation from the Big Bang, and we're finding it. It's kind of like the sonogram from the universe, and you can see that there are universes behind ours, and that kind of stuff would just show up. The quantum biology would just show up. So everything I needed, it's like it would just pop. And it's because I'm expecting it and I need it. And it's like, look, I'm writing this book. I need you guys to back me up now. And so there it is. And that was, for me personally, the fun of writing that book.
Yeah, I can see that. That is a really, really cool approach. So I think that is so helpful for people who might be tuning in too, is the idea that maybe not even necessarily having to force yourself to believe something, but just getting in alignment with stuff that you know is very expectant and things that you know are going to happen, and then kind of working from that point of view that feels right. It's like, okay, I know this can happen because, that's, I guess, the small stuff, and then just sort of be working your way up towards being able to do that sort of with everything that you do. That's the goal, I would imagine, that everybody would want to have. What is the word? The word you call it is, did I write it down? Operating observer. Is that the word that you use? Operating observer?
Excuse me. Well, that's a good word, because again, it gets into our identity. And if you're in a passive I state, like in the state where someone could tell you those are not your socks and you believe it, then that's not you as an operating observer. That's you going along with what you saw in the news tonight, or what someone told you.
Yes.
And you're just randomly believing things. Why? Because it was on the news or someone told you. So to be a really awake observer, it's another good way to put it. What I really talk about, it's from my book Reality Shifts, and it's about lucid living. You need to wake up even when you think you're awake, because lucid dreaming, we know what that is. You wake up inside your sleep. Okay, but what about waking up when you're awake? And that's the key, is knowing that there's always room to wake up a little bit more, to just realize, like, whoa, this is a dream. And then who am I? And realizing that you're much bigger than you think. So it's that identity is so important. And being, as you said, an operating observer or an awake observer or an active observer is different than being just kind of like a sheeple cattle, like, these are not my socks. Yeah. And we're joking about that one because it's so funny, but adults, we fall victim with the stock market, with what we hear on the news, with what we hear the president is doing. international news. We believe all this stuff.
Yeah.
And the whole thing about fake news. But actually, facts change. And that's the big message that I've noticed with my body of 20 years of work. So histories can be very alternate. This is built into the physics of this universe. It is the way things work for real.
Yeah.
And that's why hypnotherapy, placebo, placebo medicine, it totally works.
Yeah.
It's increasing in its efficacy and so forth. So
that is so true. I'm so glad you say that, because it actually brings up for me the detractors, the people who are like, no, that there's just concrete truth. There's truth, and we know what's true, and and everything else falls away. And I would imagine that you've had those conversations yourself.
Well, I usually don't engage in a conversation because that would require that they'd be open-minded. And if they're already saying that those facts are set, then they're not ready yet to open their mind to be a bigger sense of who they are. Mm-hmm. That's the key to being more of a thing than an actual operator. It's kind of like when you're operating a puppet, then you know that you're pulling the strings. You're the one saying those are not your socks. And like, haha, he believes now that they're not his socks.
Yeah, yeah.
And when you're the thing, then you're the puppet. And then you're the one who's like, these are not my socks. And our job is to increasingly expand your awareness of self. So it's not to get sucked into the drama of being the puppet and believing what people told you, even yourself. Like you said, we can be competitive with ourselves. But you might have told yourself something.
Oh, yeah, all the time. Yeah, my son was doing that the other day. He had a crappy morning, and I was like, are you telling yourself something that's not true? And he's like, yeah. He was telling himself that he was an idiot. He had heard it, and he was telling himself that, and I was like, wow, that's a big one. That's a really big one, and so not true, Yeah. Yeah, yeah. But so the reason I ask is I have people that I love very much that I think are open, but they want to, I mean, they're sort of open. So I guess I'm curious about cool ways to talk about bridging, that whole truth thing, like the concreteness of, because I don't personally believe that there is one truth, one pure truth. And, and that is integrated deep within my being, because I've just seen it so much in hypnosis that truth is perceptual.
And you talk about facts and about history, and it changes.
Yes.
Yeah. I know it changes too. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's an interesting juxtaposition, because I don't ever get into the habit of convincing, but I do always like to hear people's way of sharing that, and I would imagine just because you come from such a scientific base that you do talk about it with people.
What I notice is that people's mindsets, they're very protective of them typically, and I'm coming from a place of, my belief is automatically rather different, unless they're a near-death experiencer or they're also born aware. Those people, and then a lot of people that are dowsers, maybe hypnotherapists, people who've had this experience that they already know that facts change. If they know that, great.
Yeah.
Then I can actually talk to them and I can tell them what's real.
Right.
But for the large majority, because those are not the majority people on earth at the moment, it's not near-death experiencers, people who are born aware, dowsers, and hypnotherapists. If it was.
And people who had deep spiritual experiences and awakenings and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Those people are no problem, and then I can explain what's going on with the science, and we're right there. But the trouble is when the thing about the quantum physics and quantum mechanics in particular is that it's not pinned down in the way that all of the rest of our science is. It can't be. By definition, it cannot be, because it requires an observer. And the fact that quantum mechanics requires an observer, instantly, you've got a problem with the fact that these measurables they're not stable. It depends on who measured them and when, and what that observer's choices were when they made those measurements.
And scientists like stability.
Yeah. So we're at a crossroads right now, and everything that we thought we knew about classical physics and classical logic, it actually went out the window more than 100 years ago. But there has been just this clinging on, like no, don't leave that behind.
Yeah.
We need our Boolean logic. We need to believe in just true or false. This whole concept of it's all possible, it's too much for the Western mind. Now, in the East, they've got the advantage because there's been a conscious awareness of these alternate possibilities. So there's true, there's false, there's true and false, there's not true, not false. So they're okay with that uncertainty. And that's a great place to be when you're looking at quantum logic, because that's much better description of what's going on with
Oh my gosh, I never really even thought of it that way. Thank you so much for sharing that, because that is something that I want to sort of roll around in my noggin and play with, because we are at a place where I think maybe borrowing points of view from other cultures, other points of view that are already integrating it in a way. Because I take people on guided visualizations, and there are little delicious morsels that can be dropped in that are activating, regarding opening up to awareness and possibility, people's soul self, higher self. That's cool. That's really cool, Cynthia. I wanted to ask you something else too. I could talk to you forever. I have so many questions. Do you have the ability to connect with people who have passed? Do you connect with spirit energy?
Yeah, so I love genealogy. It's like my favorite go-to place, because it's like they're all dead. It's like Facebook for dead people. Oh my gosh. And then, awesome. A funny thing happened. I went to the dentist, and I'm sitting in the dentist chair, and I'm just all nervous because they're going to do some procedure that I haven't done before. And then right with me, like kind of whispering reassuringly in my ear, is the voice of I think it was a Civil War soldier, and he's saying like, "Oh, you'll be fine. This I've dealt with much worse." And it's like so funny. I felt so much better.
It's like they used to like put their hand up on there, and their leg up there, and yank it out. Oh,
yeah. And it really put things in perspective for me. And I'm like, oh, thank you. And I felt fine. Like, what? I was such a wussy. I'm sure they're going to give me all sorts of anesthesia. I'll be fine. So yeah, it was funny.
It's, oh my gosh. Well, and so we're going to have to close soon, but I want to ask you if you'd be willing to share the spontaneous healing story that your friend who called you with a broken leg, that story, I think that's a really exciting story, because self-healing, instantaneous healing happens, people. So yeah.
That's a great one. So my friend, I don't remember if I put her name in the book. Did I use a name? Well, she's giving me.
I don't think so.
I'll just be careful, because I don't want to. Because it takes courage to go through this sort of thing, and she'd been over at some sort of camping outdoor event with friends, and she'd had some beers and was jumping from one boulder to another. It's kind of like Burning Man with rocks. It was sort of, I don't know where this was, but Coachella.
Yeah, I could see, we've all, well, not all of us, but that would be the kind of situation that I might find myself in. Yeah. Jumping on rocks, are you kidding me?
It was all good. It was all great. It was all fun until she made a misstep and she broke her leg, and she's out in the middle of nowhere, and it sort of ended the fun right there. Yeah. And the worst of it was she was about to start a new
femoral break?
I think it was. Yeah. It was a bad one. And so she went to go see a doctor, obviously. She was living in Southern California, and she'd phoned me to tell me about all this. So I didn't know any of this. And then she's got me on the phone, and she's describing like, wow, this has been pretty bad, because I'll be starting a new job. I'm not only can't show up to work, but I've got this problem. I've got this broken leg, and I've got to deal with the insurance, and this looks really bad when you're starting a new job. And so that was all going on.
Yeah.
And so I talked to her on the phone, and she had remembered seeing that we'd had lunch one time, and she'd observed me trying to do this surreptitiously, but I'd had an injury on my arm, and so I put my hand up, like on my arm, because I know that sometimes injuries like cuts and burns and blisters and all sorts of things can go away just by putting my hand over it, just feel some love for it, and then when I take my hand away, it's fine. So I did that, and I thought I was being discreet, and I thought I was not drawing too much attention to the matter. But then, because she'd been talking the whole time, and then she said, "How did you do that?" And then I was like, "Oh my gosh, you saw that?" And so I was trying to do it because I know if someone's watching, they can mess it up. Like if it's just me.
Right.
So there is a definite, so this whole thing about identity matters. Who you're with matters. So, but she remembered all that. And then on the phone,
she was another observer.
Yeah, but you need a good observer who's also open-minded. And she's really good, really open-minded. And so she's talking to me, and she said, "Well, remember that time that happened? Maybe you could do some healing for me because I've got this broken leg." And I think she was open-minded. Neither of us were expecting the broken bone would be completely healed. I mean, it's fine if it is, but I just go with how good can it get, knowing that all of me and all of her knows what good is, and then I leave it open-ended. So I'm not forcing it. I'm just saying, how good can it get? With that intent in mind. And then we just talked on the phone, and I'm just feeling the leg and feeling that it's getting better. And then she said, "Oh, it's like it feels kind of itchy on the inside." And I said, "That is really good. Itchy is good," because I know from experience when you get that kind of a feeling that you're getting a definite reaction and it's going the right direction.
That's so cool.
She goes back to do more medical tests because they told her follow up because we need to see you again to do. I forget what the deal was. It's been a while now, but she goes back, sees the doctors. They tell her, that's where it starts getting weird because they're doing their tests and they don't see any evidence that she has a broken leg.
So like, you made this up, lady. You didn't break your leg.
I know. So it was, and that would be fine, except now she's taken time off from the new job and she'll have to explain why she was in the hospital for what is not a broken leg.
Oh, it gets so trippy.
It was so trippy, but it was a wonderful experience. And there have been so many, 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 many more of those in my life.
I know there are so many stories I want to ask you about. I want to your phone dropping behind the cell phone dropping behind you as you walk down the hallway. So many, and there was one I had in my head, but it's gone now. So,
but you said you've got some. You wanted to talk about one of yours.
Well, so yeah, the ring. Actually, I should be wearing it. It's right there. I could grab it, but yeah, it's just in Hawaii when I was a teenager, and I grew up on Maui, and we all hung out at McKenna Beach, and I had this ring. That group was really into heavy metal music, and a friend of mine, a guy, just liked it, and I sent you a picture of it.
Yes.
And it's a princess. It's an art, like like those big chunky metal rings back in the day, but it was made by an artist and it had like a little, it has a little garnet in it. And so when you look at it, it's a very sort of filigree princess, and it's chunky and all misshapen, been through, teenage years, stepped on, and he wanted to borrow it. And I was sort of fine with him borrowing it. So he borrowed it for a long time. And then he walked up to me one day when we were at the beach, and he's like, "I lost the ring in the water. I was body surfing and I lost it. I'm so sorry." And I was like, it just didn't make sense to me that it was gone. I couldn't believe it for some reason, which is rare. I think it's noteworthy for this story. I just was like, I'll see it again. Somewhere inside of me, I just felt like I didn't believe it. And so fast forward a long time, at least a year, and I was on a completely different part of the beach. So if you've ever been to Big Beach at McKenna, one side is, there's like a cliff, and he was over there, and it's probably like 3/4 of a mile down, maybe even a mile. And I was clear on the other side of the beach in the dry sand with my girlfriends playing in the sand, just sort of mindlessly talking story and playing with the sand. And then I looked down, and in this pile of sand that I had let sort of drain out was my ring. And I was just like, oh my God.
I love that.
But no one believed me. No one believed me at all that it had happened. They're like, there's no way that happened. And they knew
I
that it was
believe
really,
you.
thank you. I believe me too. There's just no, I mean, he lost it in the ocean, you know?
And it's so important that you're the one that knows for sure
Yeah.
that, you know, that it happened, you know, and also that you couldn't believe that you'd really lost it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, when I look back on the miraculous things that have happened in my life, there's something different in the experience as it's unfolding that is not catastrophic. That's not like freak, you know, it's not, but it's somehow natural. It's not, I don't even have to coach myself. It's just like, oh, okay. And then it seems to unfold differently. And so I don't know what to do with that information other than some things are easier to shift into that headspace than others.
Because you're already kind of there. There's a part of you that feels like that is my ring and it can't be gone.
Yeah.
And you really feel that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Cynthia, it is just so cool talking to you. My heart is just so happy knowing that there's a human being like you, a soul like you, an observer like you, out there. And I hope we can keep in touch and have you on because there's still so much more to cover. And
yes.
I just really appreciate you coming on my show, my little show. And it's awesome. Thank you.
Your show is awesome too. And you're so wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. All right.
My pleasure.
Yay. So that's our conclusion for the experience, everybody. And thank you so much for tuning in. And if you have any questions that you'd like to ask me or to ask Cynthia Sue Larson, please send them to below the description box on the YouTube channel, and I'll be sure to get them to her if you want to ask her questions. And also be sure to share and subscribe and ring that little notification bell. And until next time, thank you, everybody. Take good care.